want to be compensated?
No.
Public comments. Hearing none. Need approval of the open session minutes and closed session minutes of the regular meeting of January 18th, 2022. Any corrections? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye. All opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Review, just go right down the line,
Sure.
Review, discuss, consider request allowing Medicare enrolled employees an employee contribution to a medical flexible spending account instead of the health savings account. We laid this over from the last meeting.
Correct. So I do have a little bit more information for you. So when an employee is eligible for Medicare and enrolls in Medicare, usually Part A, according to the HSA guidelines through the IRS, they are not eligible to contribute any funds into the HSA. And so we have employees that are in that situation. We do have a little bit of data for you. We have 7 employees that could be Medicare eligible. As far as we know, they are not enrolled or have not notified us, which they do not need to. An HSA is something that is monitored by the employee. They determine and are responsible for their eligibility as well as contribution maximum and how they reimburse themselves through the HSA. That's all managed, self-managed by the employee. So we have 3 employees that stopped their HSAs that are in a high deductible health plan that are active employees. We have 2 employees that were our retirees that had stopped their HSA, so they didn't have an employer contribution. And we have 1 employee that went to a low deductible plan. So the request that we have received is for the county to consider contributing the money that we would have contributed to an HSA for an employee who is no longer eligible for an HSA contribution, to contribute that to a flexible spending account. Flexible spending accounts are very different. They're usually on a calendar year. They have more restrictions as far as how it's reimbursed. So the question is whether or not the county would be willing to look at contributing to a flexible spending account. Usually a flexible spending account is an annual election, and then it's you make the selection and of how much you want to put in it, and then it's taken out of their paycheck bi-weekly. So I don't know what that would look like for the employer and how they would contribute. Now, we did reach out to EBC, which is our administrator of our HSA and our flexible spending account. And they are telling us that in order for an employer to contribute to a flexible spending account that is not eligible due to Medicare, that the maximum amount we can contribute is $500 on an annual basis in order for the flexible spending account to be considered a benefit under the Affordable Care Act. That came from EBC. We have information that there might be other alternatives, but this is what we received from our administrator of our plan.
What are we currently contributing to the HSA account for eligible employees?
It depends which high deductible health plan they signed up for,
Right.
and then it depends if they're family or single, but for the most part, it's $2,000 per family.
So for flexible
All
spending.
pieces?
Dan, did you have something to say?
Not right now.
Okay. So for the flex, the maximum we contribute would be $500.
The other piece, just to note, I guess, is if an employee contributes, or a person, I should say, contributes to a health savings account that is not eligible under the rules because they're Medicare enrolled, there is a penalty according to the IRS, and because it's considered access. So just so you are aware of that. And that might be the case for some of our employees that haven't notified us, they may just be taking the penalty.
And the penalty is to the employee?
The penalty is to the employee, yep. I do have that here, it's a, I can read that for you. It says, the contributions that you contribute to an HSA if you are enrolled in Medicare might be considered excess by the IRS. Excess contributions would be taxed an additional 6% when you withdraw them. You'll pay back taxes plus an additional 10% if you enroll in Medicare during your HSA period.
Any questions?
So we have 7 eligible?
We have 7 that are in a high deductible health plan with an HSA, and we're contributing. So we don't know whether or not they are enrolled in Medicare or if they're just taking the penalty. We don't know that, and we don't ask because it's their HSA. I wanted to mention too that if this is a decision that the committee makes, that we would work with EBC because as we mentioned earlier last week, 2 weeks ago, that we would need to change the verbiage in our plan. Because right now, our plan only addresses employer contribution to an HSA. And we were told by EBC that in addition, they would need to send this through their legal counsel at EBC just to make sure everything is covered.
So,
I'm not in line with this, it's too unique and, sorry. I don't think I'm in line with this because it's just very unique and you're bumping up against IRS rules and making some issues that the employee may or may not be aware of. Once you go on Medicare, everything changes, and you're trying to take an employer contribution and flip it into a flexible spending account, which is really never allowed. And like you said, with a 500 limit, and then you start becoming taxable potentially. There are other ways for the employee to get the flexible spending account set up for health care. So I would not support this. Does management or administration have any recommendation?
Kim?
I guess the way that, hold on. Okay, I'm just gonna talk loud, hopefully people can hear me. The way that I see it, you've already authorized the 2,000 or 1,000, depending on the HSA plan or the high deductible plan that the employee is taking. You've already authorized that. And tax consequences are up to the employee to research on their own. The way I see this request is you're just being asked to take the 2,000 and put it in a different account. It's pretty simple. You've already authorized that benefit. Certainly if you put it in a FSA instead of an HSA, it's up to the employee to understand the tax consequences of that. So I guess I don't have a specific recommendation, but I kind of see it as a pretty simple adjustment that way. The $2,000 or $1,000, as I said, has already been authorized. The employee or employees, I think you said 7, may be affected. The 7 employees that may be affected, it's up to them to decide how they want it, and certainly the county's going to follow the EBC rules and the IRS rules, but it's up to the employee to determine the tax consequences. It's my understanding that the employee may need to, on the employee's own, have an FSA already set up for you to make the determination to put it from one account to a different account, from the HSA to the FSA. But again, that's pretty much the extent of my research on this. I guess I view the request as a pretty simple request.
You know, but flexible spending accounts have always been, you have to make the election annually, it's by pay period, and you can't get out of it. Once you do it, you have to have, so we're already into the year. I just question,
So,
and it's no longer 2,000, it's gonna be a 500 max, based on EBC
That's what
directives.
EBC told us.
Because you're changing, because flexible spending accounts have always been employee only contributions. It can't be employer, then you compromise the integrity of the plan for all employees.
And I'm not sure that it's accurate to say that it's only employee contribution. I think FSAs can have an employer contribution. It's based on the plan design, and I know the $500 limit was a response given by EBC based on the information that we gave them. So there were some assumptions made. I think additional research perhaps might be warranted, because again, if you go ahead with it. I've done very limited research on this, and it's my understanding that you could essentially put the $2,000 into an FSA without that $500 limitation.
That,
You know,
we can look into that further, but the question that we posed to EBC is, what is the maximum contribution an employer can make to a flexible spending account in this scenario with a Medicare enrollee? And their answer was 500. That's not to say that there is another option. We don't have this in our plan design right now, but this is just the response that we received from EBC, and they specifically mentioned the ACA meeting the requirements. So that definitely would need to be researched. And I think the other thing just to consider is if it is an annual election, they have that, they can use all of it right away, even before all the contributions have been made. And if the person leaves, those contributions are still made, were still made. So with HSA, if someone leaves, because we pay it every pay period, it's not an annual election that you commit to. So when they leave, then the HSA stops at the time that they leave.
But then the flexible spending account becomes a cost to the employee.
And there are
I mean, they
right.
could take $2,000 out on January 5th and we haven't put it in.
Yes.
That
And
is
there are-
always
yes.
the election. And because this is an employer contribution, it will be the employer's responsibility to take it out of your excess from anyone else that left money unplanned.
and certainly the employer, if it's a plan design change for FSA, the employer can determine how it wants to put in this contribution. And it's also my understanding, again, limited research, is that if an employee selects an FSA and decides that the employee wants to say, I'm going to put $2,000 into it, employer can do a dollar for dollar up to the cap of what the employee puts in. So there's a lot of information here that I'm sharing that, I don't know, it's up to the committee to decide. I guess when this came to my attention, I looked at it as a pretty simple, okay, you're either going to contribute it to this account or to this account. You've already decided that you're going to give $1,000 or $2,000 into an HSA. And certainly if you decide that you want to put it in an FSA because it is a different account, to benefit the employee who's on a high deductible plan, who is taking the county health insurance, there's
Who
multiple.
is on Medicare, right?
Apparently, they're not taking the county. If they're on Medicare.
No, they're on the county health insurance. I don't think that Medicare is primary.
No.
No.
But usually the county insurance is primary Medicare.
And I'm not sure that they're even on Medicare at all. I think there's misinformation
they're not on Medicare, I don't see where you can contribute
It's
to the HSA. Medicare is the one that's saying that you can no longer have your HSA contribution once you go on Medicare, and apparently that's what's happening here. And just to move things along, I'm going to make the same motion I made last time to disallow.
I'll second it.
Okay, a motion and a second, discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay, review, discuss, consider McGrath compensation analysis proposal.
In your packet, you should have a copy of the McGrath proposal. The proposal is for $5,250 to be made into installments. The projected timeline is they would complete it by the end of April. Is there anything you want to add?
Seems pretty straightforward after the discussion with Dr. McGrath at the Human Resource Committee a couple weeks ago. And I think that the scope and the purpose outlines the discussion points. As far as the funding of the 5,200, internally, we believe the funds can be within the adopted 2022 budget of the Resource Department.
What I see here is the sheriff's warrant position and the patient care position, the CNA nurse and the clerk. Didn't we discuss the maintenance mechanic? Was that part of the initial discussion on that?
If we're talking about one position, I'm sure we can add it, but we're just talking about one position. We need multiple positions. And the maintenance mechanic position has been resolved as far as the vacancy. But if you want to look at something long-term and add that one position to the study, I'm sure we can do that.
I think we should add the one more. And I'll make the motion that we accept the drafts offer here
With the one more?
with the one more. added.
Just the one position of maintenance, one
Right.
position only.
Okay. I'll second that motion. Discussion. Hearing none, I call the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The motion passes. Okay, review, discuss county recruitment and retention challenges.
I think we skipped number 7, but number 7 kind of goes hand in hand with number 6.
It was contingent.
No, I forgot that. Okay, I'll go back to 7, sorry. Review, discuss, consider wage compensation issues, the sheriff's office as a result of the 2022-24 sworn association agreement, sir.
So we're not looking for any discussion today because of the agenda item number 6. So until that happens, I don't believe there's any need at this time to discuss number 7.
Okay. And we'll go to 8. Review, discuss county recruitment and retention challenges.
We're having this as a reoccurring agenda item on the Human Resource Committee and the Executive Committee, and trying to bring both committees up to date on some challenges facing Dodge County, and this kind of dovetails into the next agenda item related to some issues with recruitment challenges at the jail, and we have staff here today from the Sheriff's Office, the jail administration to talk about that, but Don, if you want to put anything else regarding recruiting challenges, right now we're focusing on the jail. We continue to have some challenges possibly address some of that through some talk with the potential American Rescue Plan incentives, but that will be, I believe, a discussion for the ARPA ad hoc committee to deal with. But Executive Director Summers had laid out some initiatives there that hopefully will address some of that. So I'll leave it at that at this point.
I do have a little bit of information just to sort of give you a little background, I guess. This is more so with the sheriff's office. And keep in mind, this is just a picture in time. So we looked at 2020, 2021, and 2022 to look at the number of employees that were hired into the jail, that left us, or transferred out of the jail, which are a little bit more tricky to track in Chronos. So, so based on our assessment, and I can give you a copy, I don't know if you need to see it on the screen, so bear with me because I'm new to this. And it disappeared. I had it on my main screen.
Justin's here.
I don't know, we'll see.
Justin, I'm all right.
So, what do I need to do now? Oh, I need to show this one?
Yes.
No. I want to share this.
Just that.
I want to share this.
Thank you, Justin.
Can you make it bigger? I do have a handout for you as well. Again, I can't emphasize enough that this is a picture in time. So, we don't have 2019 data to say how many, openings rolled forward into 2020. But this just shows a picture of what's happening right now. Is that better?
Feels not even, it's not like.
Whoops, that didn't work. Okay, as big as I can go, I guess. But I'll walk through it real quick. I really wanted to focus more on our correctional officers, which are right here.
Lower right under your screen, you can see 100%.
That little arrow sliding by.
Yep, change that there. You may have to move left or right, but then.
Oh.
That's much better.
Okay, you want that back?
That's very
Perfect.
good.
So you can see in 2020, for correctional officers, we had 8 new hires that year, and we had, between people that transferred out and terms, we had 8. And again, keep in mind that the transfer outs are something we manually have to keep track of. There is no way in Chronos to keep track of transfers. We did not have the part-time correctional officer position at the time. But you can see that by the end of that year, we kind of stayed whole with the number of people that left the sheriff's office and correctional officer positions and the number that were hired. And then we get to 2021. I think many of you are aware there's the great resignation that happened everywhere and particularly hit hard in the sheriff's office and our correctional officers. We had 10 new hires, and we had 3 new hires that went into part-time correctional officer positions. But we had 17 people either terminate employment or transfer out. Some of those came back as part-time, a couple of them did, but we still have full-time slots to fill. So that gave us a net for that year of a -7. And this year alone, just where we're at as of, I think there's a termination coming up, a resignation coming up here in February that's included in this. But we've had 2 new hires. We had 3 transfer out. They're going to other positions in the county. They're taking jobs either in human services or in the clerk reports or there's more administrative jobs. And then we had 5 terms already this year, leaving us a -6. So between 21 and 22, we're down 13. Now, I know there were some changes in the sheriff's office with going 12-hour shifts, but this has had a huge impact on operations in the sheriff's office. And that's what I wanted to focus on. I do have the other positions listed here as well. Sergeants and corporals, a lot. Some of it is because people didn't leave, but most of it is because of the transition in the sheriff's office to the 12-hour shifts. So they have less corporals, they have a few more sergeants, and that was part of the study that was done in the sheriff's office to increase the number of sergeants.
Keep in mind in 2021 also that a lot of those terms were retirements. If you go back to when we opened the jail initially, there was a large hiring all at once of employees, and they've all gotten to the point where they put in their time, and so that they were all due for retirement last year as well. I think we've gotten through the vast majority of those. I don't think we have any more of those upcoming, but I was a big part of that 13 last year.
So again, just a picture in time to express what is happening at the sheriff's office, specifically the correctional officers. Anything else to add?
We have the next topic, yeah. You want to touch on the resolutions first before I get that stuff?
You want to move to number 9? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. Next one is authorization of the 2022 jail staff retention incentive, Dodge County Sheriff's Office Association Rescue Plan Act, authorization of 2021 funds.
On the resolutions first.
There's a draft resolution, should have a draft resolution that would be, or
It's to the right of your packet. I think it was given separate. Is that one you're looking at?
that one has draft on it.
Yeah.
It was sent out late Friday too. It was emailed out Friday.
What I have to the left is for the elected.
It's with all the.
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
Good.
We have 2 resolutions before that.
Okay, if we're on number 9, there's a combination with that. There's a draft resolution that right now is in the draft form, would be co-sponsored by Human Resource Committee and Judicial Public Protection. Along with that, in the packet, there was additional information from some of our neighboring counties regarding what they have implemented as far as retention. Notable was Fond du Lac County and recent action taken in Columbia County. And also there was a job recruitment notice from Winnebago County for a corrections officer listing, I believe the starting wage was at $26.73, $26.74 for corrections officers. So all of this is together, this information was presented together in combination with bringing some issues forward to both committees regarding some challenges that are facing Dodge County regarding corrections officers. And so it's not unique to Dodge County. The challenges, but just wanted this committee and judicial public protection to be aware of what's happening outside of Dodge County related to corrections as well. I know the sheriff and his staff have some additional comments or information as well.
So back in October, you'll recall that we expressed concern regarding the recruitment and retention of our staff. And at that time, we expressed the desire to move forward with the sign-on bonus, which you approved, JPP approved, and as a result, I think we've seen some positive successes in the recruitment. Prior to that date, we had one person that we hired for the entire year of 2021. After that, we hired the remainder of what you saw in that chart, which 7 or 8 people in the last few months of the year. It was very beneficial. I think we made some significant progress there. However, as many as we hired, we lost just as many. At the same time, I know the county administrator brought forward some retention options, which I know this committee has been working on and has recommended for the ARPA funding. There is, however, we really need to stress the urgency here for retention of our current staff. And I know you're doing the study for the wages. That's great. Unfortunately, that's going to be a couple months down the road. And our employees have to wait a little bit longer here to get those results back before you can take any action on the wages. And so there is a real urgency here, and I've got Lieutenant Beck, Lieutenant Hunt, and Chief Deputy there that have some additional information for you as well. But we are in emergency mode here. We have to do something to retain our current employees. And they are watching. They're watching very closely. In fact, there's one resignation out there. I don't know if we're going to be able to convince him to stick around, but what happens here, what happens Friday at JPP, what happens regarding this resolution is being watched by him and others in the jail. It's also being watched very closely by our communications officers. I know they're not on the docket, they're not on this, but our 911 center is the most important room in the county, in my opinion. They answer all the 911 calls, and if we are not able to retain them, and we are like all the other neighboring counties we have where they're struggling to maintain their communications officers, how am I going to be able to answer 911 calls? It's something we have to consider here if we're going to work to retain our correctional officers. I would personally like to see incorporated in this draft the communications officers as well. That's up to you. I understand we're in an emergency in the jail. That might be a proactive solution to make sure we don't lose any in the communications division. I want to talk a little bit about wages. You saw those packet additions there, that some of the additional bonuses that employees in Columbia and Fond du Lac are getting, and some others are as well. We talk about the prisons. I want you to understand that the Dodge County Jail is a maximum security facility. We do not allow people to traverse like they do at Fox Lake. We are a maximum security facility. The maximum security prisons across the entire state right now have a $2 an hour bonus added to their wages. Supervisor Guggenberger has said 1901, is that what you said that they were starting at in prisons? I didn't see it, 1901. So that's $2 on there. That would apply to Dodge Correctional. Waupun Correctional, because they are at more than 40% vacancy, have a $5 an hour add-on to all of their correctional officers. So that takes it up to 2401. You've got Dodge that's just below, and you've got WCI that's significantly above our starting wage. That is a real concern when you're looking at the pool of correctional officers we're looking to draw from. Waupun and Dodge Correctional are the largest 2 employers of prisons within Dodge County. And we are competing for those same individuals, and we've had individuals who have applied and who have backed out because of that. We had them in our background process, and they backed out because there is this incentive that the state has put out there. We currently have 14 vacancies in the jail, and the Chief Deputy is going to chat a little bit about what happens if we continue to have additional vacancies. But I am desperately asking you to strongly consider putting some urgency, and I know you have, and this committee has, but there has to be some urgency on the retention of our current staff. They are watching what's going on in our neighboring counties. A lot of our employees, as Dusty's going to tell you here shortly, are going to day shift, Monday through Friday position, not weekend positions. In this resolution, not only is the retention a quarterly bonus, but there's also a weekend increase for $2 an hour on from Friday evening until Monday morning. That's very similar to what Columbia County is doing. We need to have these things to not only entice new employees to come in, but to retain the ones we have that are leaving. We just joked the other day, we need to go out and sit out in front of Newman Pools and make sure no other employees can go to Newman Pools, because they've got those Monday through Friday positions. We have employees going to Monday through Friday positions within the county because they don't want to work nights and weekends. And when you have a lack of labor pool like we do now, and all of these Monday through Friday positions open, who wants to work nights and weekends? And that's what we're up against. That's what we're struggling with. So I know Lieutenant Beck has some information he'd like to share regarding some of the exit interviews that he's been directly part of.
So I'm going to rehash the numbers that Tanya and the sheriff mentioned here. So we have 13 vacant corrections officer spots right now in the jail, plus one where the sheriff says we have 14. That's a program spot that will be filled by a corrections officer. So essentially we have 14 vacant spots right now. One of the biggest points I want to make to everyone is that we have not had an applicant for a full-time corrections officer spot complete an application since January 19th. So we have 14 vacancies in the jail, and I have nobody to interview right now. Just going to throw some more numbers out at you, and just kind of jive with Tanya. And Tanya and I did not coordinate to get these numbers. Since July of last year, we have lost 23 officers to retirement or resignation. And then by officers, I mean sergeants, corporals, officers, things like that. So what I did yesterday is I pulled together some exit interview notes from 21 of them that resigned in since July of last year. The other two I couldn't get to because we were having some network issues. So this most recent employee that's leaving, she simply is leaving, going to the private sector due to corrections stress. Anyone that knows anything about law enforcement, public safety knows what corrections stress is. She's been there for 17 years. Other employee that's leaving this week here, who we have tried everything to retain, is also going to the private sector. He was with us for 2 years. He's leaving for the private sector. Again, he's with us for 2 years. He's going to basically a factory job that is paying more and has a better schedule. I have 19 of these if you guys want me to keep going down the list. Is anyone interested in that?
We understand, or I understand, where you're coming from with retention. We've talked about this for a few months now. My problem is with this resolution, you didn't make the deadline for January 21st for the ARPA funds. The committee's going to meet tonight. I'll gladly bring this up at the committee for the ARPA funds, but I'm not going to come in here late, be the late caddy, and bring it into the committee for ARPA funds. We asked to be fair for everybody that did put in their request on January 21st. I don't think this would be fair to add another one. I just don't see it that way.
Before you start responding, I think it's really important that you hear, and I understand what you're saying, Dennis. I think it's really important that you hear some of the chief deputies' facts and figures here about what's going to happen here. I understand the fairness part of it, but I think it's really important from a fiscal standpoint that you understand what's going to happen here if we don't take some action. If that's okay.
And I realize what's going to happen when we lose. We can only have so many prisoners for so many guards. I get that. And the fiscal impact in it, to bring that information to the ARPA committee tonight, I think would be the best way. I don't think this committee can go in there, or I can't feel right about it. We ask facilities, every other department to have their, by the 21st, to bring to the ARPA committee. Now, to make an exception, I don't feel that's proper.
Well, that was something.
I mean, I feel, if you guys want to come to that meeting tonight, yeah, Jim.
Just want to, I don't want to get into, whatever the county board wants to do in the ad hoc committee, that's up to them, but we do have 2, if not 3 proposals that were submitted late that are on that list for tonight. This is not unique. There was a noon deadline on January 21st, and there were a couple proposals that came in after that, and they're on that list. So I just want to lay that out. And also I want to lay out, I don't know what the ad hoc committee is going to do, but that with the ARPA funds, since the obligations have to be committed by October 24, I think if the committee takes a hard stand that the applications submitted by January 21st are it for the next 3 years, how are issues addressed in following years in 22 and 23 of issues that arise that we don't know what they are at this time. We don't have a crystal ball, but in my opinion, again, it's up to the ad hoc committee, there needs to be some flexibility because there will be issues that are going to come up in the remainder of 22, 23, and even 24 that aren't on that list because we don't know what they are. So I'm just saying that I understand your point, Dennis, I understand it completely, but I'm hoping that who's ever on the ad hoc committee and chairs that committee and is in that structure understands that the measure of flexibility, because we cannot predict the future. Nobody can.
Jim, I'm well aware of that, but I'm just saying that I would leave this up to the ad hoc committee.
That's fine, that's leave it up to the ad, but I will find out to the ad hoc committee which
That's
ones
fine.
came in late.
And that's fine, but I think it's up to that committee to make a decision if they're gonna allow, what they're gonna allow. I'm not speaking for that committee, I'm speaking for myself here on this committee. And I just don't see where I can actually go and say, yeah, I'm gonna bring this forward right now. To that committee without
But ultimately,
finding out where they're gonna be at.
but ultimately what's being asked for in this resolution, and action is not imperative today by this committee that we discussed, it's on JPP agenda for Friday, and if there's a desire to move something forward to the county board, that's up to the 2 committees to do that, and then once it's on the county and the county board's hands, if it's allowed to be on the agenda on February the 22nd, then it's up to the county board how they wish to deal with it. Because this is not a committee decision, it's trying to get a recommendation in front of the county board. That's all it's trying to do.
I get that, Jim.
I don't think
And
we
I'm
can
just
talk
saying-
about ARPA here though, Dennis. I think, yes, ARPA is the dollars that are identified in this. But if we didn't have ARPA, we would still be coming to you and saying, this is urgent matter and we need to do something. And whether this is ARPA funds or this is not ARPA funds, and we find this some other way, we have to have this discussion. We cannot sit here and wait, because if we continue to wait, we are going to have drastic fiscal repercussions. And I really would like, if we could, I'd really like Scott to be able to share with you.
In this resolution, you're asking for ARPA funds, and that's,
And I just don't think we should get hung up on that.
We
Okay,
could-
yes,
the
there's a
amendment,
draft.
The resolution, that's why it's a draft. It could be a different funding source. If that's the direction of the 2 committee, to find an additional funding source, if that's the direction, we'll take that.
I would definitely take that. I'm not against any of this. I'm against, what I'm saying is with the ARPA funds, I know what I'm gonna hear at the county board level and stuff. This didn't come in, and Jim, you can come, I know you'll present at that committee tonight.
So if they want to take a hard stance on that June 21st deadline, that's their prerogative.
Correct, it's not mine. I'm just saying, I don't feel right by this committee, or for myself,
So,
doing it
so
right now
you're saying,
without,
so you're saying you would support this resolution?
Yes, I would.
If there was a different funding source?
that or the ARPA committee, whoever's on that ARPA committee tonight goes, will allow this to come forward. I'm fine with that. I'm not against any of this, trying the retention and that. What I'm saying is, I think if we're gonna have that meeting tonight with the ARPA committee, this should be brought up, and if they wanna allow this to come in. The other thing with this, we've already presented, this committee presented a resolution to give every employee here a bonus. Now, the question's gonna come up, did these correctional officers get that part of the bonus too? Or are they gonna get cut out of that? I'm just telling you, this, you opened a can of worms here by coming in late, and as we've discussed that over the
We came in late.
previous months.
But Dennis,
And
we came in late with the actual resolution, but we have been talking about this since October.
I know, for a couple of months, and like I said, my feeling is we should take that to the ARPA committee.
And that's fine. But it would be good for everybody here to have a good understanding of all of the facts. And
I don't think any of us here don't understand the facts.
But you don't, we have some really good information for you we'd like to present, if we could.
We're gonna hear that. Scott, please.
All right, I'll keep it relatively quick. I did some calculations yesterday, just like what we've been talking about, a snapshot in time because it's constantly changing. But before I get to those, I just want to hit 2 high points from a presentation that our finance director did last month to JPP, which was like at least the fourth analysis of the impact of federal borders in the jail. And it showed that when JPOD closed, we had a 10% decrease in variable expenses, which was $952,000-ish. But we lost $1.7 million in revenue. It was a big impact. And part of that analysis, he also compared the Dodge County tax levy for law enforcement services to a lot of other counties, including Columbia, Jefferson, Washington, Fond du Lac, Green Lake. Columbia was the highest with $84.08 per capita. Dodge County was second from the bottom at $34.13. The only one lower was Waukesha, who also uses federal borders. And the bottom line was being able to maximize the bed capacity in the jail by filling it with federal borders significantly reduces the amount that Dodge County taxpayers have to pay. So let me get to my quick analysis. Right now, looking at the Sheriff's Office budget for 2022, it was budgeted at 160 federal beds a day. And with us being mostly full staffed, with the current vacancies, we have about $89,000 of unused expenses per day, or per month, I'm sorry. When you add in overtime, and right now, just for February, the posted overtime is over $2,600. It'll likely be much more than that because of unexpected overtime at the end of or to come short notice. Our lost revenues at 39, we're currently 39 below our 160 target for borders. That means that's $103,000, about $104,000 a month we're coming up short on revenues. And then when you add in about $30,000 worth of what we're paying for county inmates that we're keeping at other county facilities, that brings us to a monthly deficit, again, snapshot, of over $46,000 per month. If you extrapolate that out 10 months, if everything stayed identical for 10 months, you're talking over $460,000 in a deficit just from that. Compare that to the retention incentive, it's 320-some thousand. So even if everything stayed the same, by doing the incentive, it would likely be much better impact on our overall budget. The reality, though, where it really gets important is if we lose a few more correctional officer positions, there is a high likelihood we would have to close another pod, which means about approximately 50 more federal beds, which is $133,000 more per month added on to what I just told you, which, again, extrapolate that over 10 months, you're talking about almost a $1.8
million shortfall. Now, this is a very quick, high-level review of those. Obviously, there would be a small amount of savings from other areas, but as the finance director's analysis showed again, that those variable costs are the ones, they don't offset the lost revenue, they just do not. If we fail to take some action in the near future and we have to close another pod, that could be very catastrophic. As far as last year, we ended the year well below our bed count, but because of the ability to, we worked very hard throughout the year, we're going to end up last year's budget being very close to it being a little bit in the black yet. That's how significant that can be. If we can take some action and get this turned around, we can significantly reduce the chances of having a significant shortfall. So I wanted you to have at least some basic numbers and understanding of just how close. We're in a very precarious position, and these guys know it, the gentlemen from the jail know it better than any of us, because they are doing the hard work every day of trying to manage these folks and keep them on board as we try to do these things. But the longer it takes, there's only so much we can do.
I do have a question on something that Dennis brought up. So this proposal resolution would go through the jail staff retention. And then we're talking also about the premium bonuses for all county employees. Are you going to double those up to the staff, or are you going to separate this jail staff out?
To be honest, I thought about that yesterday and really haven't been able to come up with an answer. And I would like to, I think that would be a good conversation to have with our committees to see what the best path moving forward would be, either to amend this this resolution to compensate for it. I don't know when that's going to happen. The reason why we brought this forward for conversation is because of urgency. Because while we know you guys have been, in December you wanted to bring something forward and you weren't able to get it moving forward. This is urgent. That's why we're bringing this forward. This is just a draft. If we need to change this, that's fine. If we need to add on to make sure that we can fill our correctional officer positions because they're that far behind, I think that's a conversation we can have and discuss. But we need to do something quickly because I have some people who are sitting here waiting and watching and applying, and I don't want to get to that where we are losing more people to Monday through Friday jobs making equal to or more money. Because then we're gonna have a really hard time with our budget the remainder of this year. So that's the focus of it. I understand there's ARPA issues, I understand, but there is an urgency that we have to move quickly on this to maintain some of these long-time employees that aren't gonna stick around much longer.
So my question is, if it's an emergent, which obviously is ARPA the right way to go? Because it doesn't look like the ARPA is going to do it that quickly. It looks like you need it sooner rather than later.
That's what I was going to say. I'm not going to make an amendment or anything at this point, but we keep talking about urgency, and I know we should have a more overall plan. And that's what we're trying to address with the study through McGrath. But I would rather see us, the sign-on bonus was a quick, let's try it, see what it is. It's to be reviewed. It is not a long-term permanent decision. Isn't that what we're looking at here also? And they have more than enough funding because of all the vacancies to not have to amend the budget if we do add $1, $2, weekend incentives, whatever. I'd rather see us act on that through general budget and not ARPA, because that is not in our control, and that if we need urgency, let's do something. And again, make sure it's temporary. I mean, it's to be reviewed. It isn't forever. It may be years, but it isn't forever. It can be reviewed again, because we have an urgency. And it's the environment we're in. It may never change. the economic environment, the workforce. That's something that takes time. It's not gonna change next year or 2 years. I'd rather see us go that route.
I would rather see it just put in without using the ARPA and do it that way. I think you get it through a lot quicker, and there's not gonna be as many, drag out that very long into that movement, which appears it is.
And I'm not saying that it has to be temporary so that the employees feel bad about it. I'm just saying that we need to say it will be reviewed again, because that is something we have to do to be responsible, I feel, to ourselves, to the committee, and to the board, and the constituents. Because we have to react again, probably, in time.
So then, hearing that, which is very good, so then is the direction, since this is a draft, and it's
Yeah.
purposely put as a draft, for this discussion to come back on February 15th with different wording. I mean, this is, still has to go to JPP, and I'm discounting that or trying to dismiss that. It's very important that this committee and JPP are together on direction. So this would be, what I'm hearing is a kind of a direction or recommendation to JPP to discuss on Friday at their meeting regarding the similar draft.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I'd be happy to see JPP, because whatever we would do would be pending JPP's approval. So if JPP presented it to us, it's easier for us to approve it without having to worry about their approval. Because I'm not gonna step on their toes.
Are we looking for a resolution, or are we just more looking for something that you and JPP can act on, similar to the sign-on bonus, on a temporary basis, maybe to be reviewed 6 months, every 6 months, or reviewed on a certain date? I guess that's, we know what to put together.
I mean, obviously it's gonna be reviewed. I mean, if we're gonna do the bonus part, it's gonna be reviewed at some point. And as Karen said, depending on where your economy goes and where everything else is, we'll review it at that point.
But not necessarily a resolution.
Well,
Do we need a resolution for this, or would we do it similar to what we did with the sign-on bonus, where both committees agreed and then it was implemented?
okay.
I think it would be dependent on funding source. So if it was a general fund, you were gonna tap the general fund to cover the jail incentive, then it would be a resolution. But if the direction is that this resolution is not needed, but the content in terms of the actual incentives really is just coming from the sheriff's budget.
Sheriff's budget.
Because you've got vacancies, then I think it could be a motion from both of the committees.
How do you feel about that with your budget?
Now, we can certainly take a look at it.
Just off the top of my head right now, and Dave can chime in if he agrees, we're already at a deficit for this year,
Yeah.
and the only way we're getting back to a balanced budget is by quickly getting HPOD open. And at this point, I honestly don't see that happening before mid-year. So I don't see that our ability to, it's unlikely at this point that we'd be able to absorb that all unless everything broke our way, which hasn't been happening for a while.
But being in a deficit this isn't causing it. You have adequate salary and fringe budget to absorb it.
Yes.
These are other issues that would need to be funded.
Okay.
I would think that that is just a result of what you're telling us. It will be a deficit at year end, and committees know it. I don't think giving you 100,000 now because we're doing some salaries, but not really, it's gonna be for lost revenues, really, not for this specific proposal.
To answer your question, there are 14 authorized and budgeted positions that are vacant. So all of those wages are authorized for expenditure. And yes, we could certainly utilize those funds to pay these incentives.
Yeah, for line items, essence, if you would put this through, you'd be saved for lost revenues, which is a whole nother issue. I mean, a multitude of issues.
So the committee is someone in agreement, we have consensus on that?
Could you have any thoughts on $2 an hour, and just try and put something together for JPP to consider, so you, kind of a starting point. $2 an hour weekend, are we gonna look at anything for?
Is that enough?
That's what Columbia County is doing.
And that would be for everyone.
That would be-
This is not for new hires, this is,
All correctional officers,
correctional
corporals, and
officers.
sergeants programs.
and,
Hours of work.
pardon me?
Hours of work.
Work, not, yeah, not off time, never.
And is it just gonna be that, or is there a
And
bonus that we
communications
throw in?
officers, and communication officers on the weekends.
Yeah, why don't you run it past JPP?
Yeah,
and
that's
bring
what
it
I
back
would-
to us,
I agree.
and what their suggestion is, we're going to take that and pass on.
I was just kinda looking for a starting point,
Okay.
and what you guys would be palatable if we brought something back to you, and then we'll take it to them on Friday. But, do you have any thoughts on a one-time, maybe a one-time bonus to kick things off before we get any ARPA funds, maybe if that one goes through? Is there any appetite for that? Or I don't wanna bring it up to them if you're not even interested in it.
I guess the two options that we've discussed here now, do you think you can take it out of your budget to do that?
So there may be an appetite, if we could take it out of our budget, there may be an appetite for a one-time bonus. Maybe.
And it, like I said, Neil, we've already tried to do the one-time bonus
Yeah.
to the ARPA. And, you know, the other, Karen brought up two other solutions there that I think you should look at. I'd say at the end of the year, if you're a budget deficit, that'll be dealt with in November.
Yes. Understood. Again, just looking for appetite from
No,
this committee. I don't want to bring something back to you that you're not going to want.
And I don't want to hear that, you know, this committee is, oh, we're against the employees and stuff like that.
No, I've never said that about this committee.
But I'd be interested in seeing what JPP has to say on it.
Yeah.
There isn't anything here that I wouldn't support, but even the quarterly bonuses at this point for retention. I like it spaced out over time, more so than the one that had like 5 years that got something. I was reading through other examples we have here. Current, on payroll, whatever, be it a year or 5. We just need something quick.
Thank you.
Good? Let's see, review, discuss, consider wages for the 2023-26 term for sheriff and clerk of court. I didn't bring my worksheet, Karen didn't bring hers.
Yeah, you know, I brought it.
Oh, did you bring it?
I
You
brought
did
it,
bring
I just
Okay. I
didn't,
didn't bring mine.
I didn't come up with a determined recommendation. I looked at it and then put it away.
So, thoughts on, where do we want to start with this?
I was hoping that over a 4-year period, I take it to get to the market, what we need for percentages to get to the market. It's $107,000 with the average market is.
Okay.
that possible, Dave?
Whatever you want to do,
Well, you can either just a percentage per year for 4 years to get to that market value, correct?
well, I would defer to McGrath, you know, for that, but you can design anything you want. This is a superfluous, made-up example. You're going to do 20% in year one and then take back 17% the next year. You could do it, I don't know that you want to do it that way, but however the board wants to do it, they can do it.
But keep in mind, in year 4, the market's not gonna be at 107. It's gonna be something higher.
And then it'll be changed again.
It'll be, but year 4, I mean, 107 is an average, but in year 4, the market won't be 107. It's gonna be something greater than that.
Market won't be the same even next year.
Right.
For January 1st of 2023, it will go up depending
Right.
what we do for cost of living increases.
Right.
And
If you're,
county.
correct.
But you can never, if you can only, if you can at least catch up, that's one thing.
And last time, I think what we did was, we started off with a 6% and then it went down every year, didn't it?
6% year 1 and then 1.5 years 2, 3, and 4.
And my question would be, do you want to average that out over the 4 years and say, hoping that the 107 is close to market value then, which we know isn't going to be?
Well, if you're a little over it at least.
So that in essence, the position, if I understand you correctly, the position then would increase about 7% over 4 years. So less than 2% a year.
If you average it out
Well,
over the 4 years.
But, I mean, the reality is that the current position is almost 101. So if you went to if the goal is to get to 107 in 4 years, that's actually $6,000 over 4 years. If that's where you want to end up.
So the current market's 107.
Right.
Something we have.
I'll give you a copy of this here. You looking at
With
the
the
market?
wage scale or the?
No, so-
No, that's different companies.
6222.
Looking at this email from January.
I brought everything.
I can make copies, Karen.
No, I have everything.
The simple copy. I know there's a lot of paper. Yeah, that's the big copy. It looks like this.
Okay,
You can use this one.
Thank you. So I need.
That's fine.
So we want to get to market. Okay, so we're already behind market. Will we just do 6 first year, 2, 2, and 2?
That would be better.
That'll get us to market for the year, and then the rest is cost of living. And that's just an estimate, 2%.
Because there's no cost of living for the position.
No. I understand. I'm saying, built into this would be kind of the cost of living. What I'm saying, if you do 6% the first year, 2, 2, and 2. 6, 2, 2, and 2.
That's in essence,
Say that again. What you thought?
it's
No, no.
entirely up to the committee.
Well, if we do 6%, it brings us up to market the first year.
Yes, it does. It'll take you to 107,
Correct.
And then if you do a 2, then it would be 109, 183, another 2%, 111, 367, and another 2%, 113, 594. So by the end of the 4 years, you'll be out 113, 594. So that's assuming a 2% basically cost of living after 2023.
Correct. Which we don't.
That's just for the sheriff's office, sheriff position.
Any thoughts?
Clerk of court is similar. It's just a little shy of the 82,320 of the market the first year. 6% comes out to 81,920.
So, yeah, I would do the same thing then too. 6222.
I'd like to see that, yeah.
Going, fine. Want to get the market right away?
Yeah.
And this one, the only thing I had in my head was maybe a 3 second year. Because what we know,
What's going to happen?
where we are right now.
So 6322.
I'm throwing it out there.
I mean, yeah, I mean, trying to figure out what cost of living is going to be in the future. We're looking at, I'm not going to put the 6322.
This was a product.
Make a motion.
Did you make a motion for the
No,
other one?
I was just talking about,
So am I.
I'll make the motion.
622,
6322
3?
for both positions. Any discussion? Well, I have a second. Any second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, say
Just,
aye.
Joe, just for clarification, so is the direction then to bring a resolution to the February 15th Human Resource Committee for consideration by the county board on February 22nd? It's just trying to make sure we understand the direction here.
Yeah, because we want to get it,
Yes.
because if there's any changes, we have to do it before the elections. So, yes, sooner better.
Okay. We can make that happen, then we just want to make that, just want to clarify.
Yes.
Okay. So, we have a motion, a second discussion. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Review, discuss, American Rescue Plan Act, under Resolution 2169. This is the one we looked at before.
We just put that on the agenda, included it in the packet in advance of the county board discussion. Just wanted you to be aware of it, that resolution was technically laid over by the county board in February. Just wanted you to be aware of what that content was of the resolution, not looking for any direction, but with awareness of it.
Okay, so everybody's okay with that? Review, discuss, consider any cost of living adjustment benchmarks for 2023 budget. Those are what we discussed before as far as the ones we talked about for staff benchmarks, right? So,
Right, and I've asked, Dave's here, and I know Dave Frolin's here, Chair of the Finance Committee, but what we're hoping for is between this committee and the Finance Committee to have some direction or agreement on what the CPI benchmarks are for the 2023 budget in advance of the budget process starting, because we had quite a bit of discussion last November on what an appropriate CPI adjustment is. part of that is because there was an agreement or firm direction on what the benchmark should be. So just, I asked Tanya to put this on, it's been on finance, it was on the finance committee agenda earlier in January, but just want to start that discussion so there can be some agreement that would help the budget development process. Some agreement is made.
Well, I know the Trump was just to do it to Social Security, plus of the type of that.
I don't think that's here.
I'm sorry. But, I mean, that was discussed, that's all I'm saying.
I don't know if Dave has any thoughts, Dave Solon?
And I mean, we pretty much dropped the ball with the 1.25, right?
Depending who you talk to, yes.
Okay. But
And
But-
because of the economy, because of COVID, because of the market, the workforce issues that are out there, normally, you know, you can't keep up with everything. And you can't afford it. I mean, the budget reality is, it's limited. You can do it once in a while.
You can't sustain this forever.
That's all I wanted to say. I have, the accountant in me has to bring that out every time.
And I think people need to understand that too. You can't sustain this forever, and sooner or later, you're gonna have to do one of two things. It's either personnel or services.
Or both. I
Or
mean,
both.
because we're service
I mean,
driven.
it's a balancing act, I get that part.
So that's why it's on the agenda, is hoping you're through time here in just beginning February, but if there could be some combined direction from the two committees, I think it would help tremendously in the development of the budget process.
Do you want to have a joint meeting between HR and finance to discuss it?
It's however the two committees wish to approach it.
So you know, like Joe said, you know, do it by Social Security, but I don't believe I'm doing that either because that's never on.
It's too late.
It does come late.
Is there something out there that's a little more reliable that we can look at as we go along?
Well, time, one at a time.
Well, one resource we've used in the past, and the resource that's used sometimes in some types of negotiations, is CPI. And then the Wisconsin Department of Revenue puts out through the Wisconsin Employment Relations Committee, which is a work, suggested basically CPI. And I believe they do that monthly.
And then there's forecasting.
Yes,
That
they
one is
forecast
that
for the board.
forecast. That work, Wisconsin Employment Relations one is the one that's more of a forecast.
Is that what we'd be better off following then?
Well, let's look at it. Yeah.
It's a resource.
That's what
No,
we
Maybe
need.
it's
I
not
mean-
the only
A guide.
resource
We're
you're
not gonna
considering.
go-
No, I get that part too.
Yeah, well,
But-
I'm reminding everyone else, it's a
Yeah.
guide. Not,
So do you want to present us with a couple options with that, Diane?
because there are multiple CPIs,
So,
regional, unemployment, that they put out.
so let's
And
try
you need
to-
to be more regional. So at least Wisconsin employment is Wisconsin.
And I think it would help all county board supervisors if there was some type of, like benchmark or forecast or rationale, so that's identified at the very beginning of the process, not at the end of the process. I think it would help the entire budget process immensely.
Okay, so you give some recommendations on that. Okay, review this, discuss and consider personnel requisitions.
We have a full-time program assistant for an employee that was promoted. We have an accounting technician full-time position This is the position that was previously the Human Services Fiscal supervisor position, that they were having challenges in recruiting, and it has now been created as an accounting position. We have a aging disability resource specialist position. This is due to a promotion. And we have a case manager, community programs for an employee that has resigned.
Questions on those? Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign, and motion passes. Review, discuss, consider leave of absence request.
We have one leave request. This is an employee of child support who has been employed for less than 12 months. So they do not qualify for FMLA. So this is an unpaid medical leave. It is from January 19th until March 2nd, and we do have supporting medical documentation. And it is supported by the supervisor, given that they're relatively new employee.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. Review salary, wage, and status changes.
Okay. We have an appointed official to the drainage board, Neil Stickich. We have Hannah Rollinger, who was promoted to the nutrition program coordinator position. We have Patrick Olson. This is a rehire as a highway maintenance technician. We have Danielle Wickersham, who has a status change from a part-time RN public health nurse to full-time. We have Lillian Caitlin, who also is going from part-time more than 20 to full-time as part of the 2022 approved budget. And we have an employee that transferred from senior social worker CPS investigator to family court counselor.
Any questions on those? Okay, Human Resource Director's report.
Right. So other than the ones that we have already discussed, we have 2 full-time correctional officers that are leaving us. We have a full-time highway maintenance tech that has given notice. And, we have 1 social worker, CPS, and that one, we've done the exit interview. We know that they're going to, I believe, the clerk of courts in Dane County as a social worker.
Yes, a social worker.
We had 1 on-call RN. On-call.
Update Human Resource Director's recruitment.
Requisitions, so he has stuff up. Jump forward to the future
Okay,
agenda items
future
and
items,
just
well,
go back
the
to that.
sheriff's recommendation for CPP, and also the COLA.
Maybe ARPA resolution again. That's-
I'm sorry, I step out.
We just skipped ahead to agenda items.
Yeah, the update regarding Human Resource Director's recruitment.
The goal is, continues to be to have a resolution brought to this committee on February 15th regarding the appointment recommendation and forward that to the county board on February 22nd. We had interviews yesterday again, and trying to schedule a 3rd visit, so the goal remains to have a resolution before the committee on February 15th.
So future agenda, sheriff's recommendation for JPP, whole discussion.